Welcome to Shut Up and Sit. I'm Yedda Stansel, a consciousness coach and consultant. I'm on a mission to bring mindfulness to the modern world. Each week, we will offer ancient healing practices, real-world examples, and the latest research in neurobiology and behavior change into fun conversation that invites you to wake up your highest self. Now, let's go shut up and sit. All right, welcome back to the show, everybody. Yedda here as always, and you know what I'm about to say. I'm excited to be here, and I am extra. Excited wouldn't even do justice to how I'm feeling today because I have an amazing guest here with me, Jason Redman, and welcome to the show, Jason. I am in the presence of some serious badassery. Like, I need to take my shoes off. I'm on holy ground, my friend, when I am with you. How are you?
I am good. Yeah, it's so good to see you again. It's been several years since we've gotten to reconnect, but yeah, it's so awesome to see the things that you're doing and to catch up and because both of us are full speed ahead.
We are. It's been a few years, and so for our listeners, for our viewers, we're at the end. You guys know I've been teaching you all the content in the Shut Up and Sit course, the book. Jason, these guys have been hanging with me. Maybe you guys have been through the whole thing. Yeah, maybe you've only started listening and now you want to go back. Wherever you are in the journey, here's the thing. I sat down at the end and I was like, all right, so who do I want to wrap this up with? Who's overcome and who, I'm not saying I'm badass. I got a little badass in me.
You are badass.
No. Like when shit hits the fan, I'm running and getting behind you. Okay. So that's
only because I take bullets well. Well, proven fact. I absorb bullets well.
That's a pretty amazing thing and I'm excited for you to tell our listeners your story because you literally have taken bullets and put your life on the line for all of us in our country. And that's that's badassery at a level that I can't even comprehend. And that's why you all, when I was sitting down and I was thinking about this, I was like, so you guys have heard, I've had lots of different clients in the book, Jason, that have come in and been guests on the show through different chapters. I've taught individually. We've had some cool experiences. But I was like, who's the one person who embodies all of the work of overcoming, going within, shutting up, sitting down, digging into their mindset, and then coming back out into the world and then making a difference and serving other people and helping them? And I was like, I know the exact person. And I thought of you. And I thought of you for that reason. I also thought of you because you have an incredible story of overcoming. And the work that you do in the world helps people overcome. So before we jump into all kinds of other stuff, I'm just wondering, would you share your story with our audience? Because not many of my listeners probably know your story. And it's really powerful. Would you mind sharing that with us?
No, I'm honored. And so shut up and listen.
Ooh, no, I love it. There's that I love a military man. And then the long hair admiral, which is what you call your wife, tell her it's okay. I can love you. I can love you from a distance. But I'm telling you that military, and you might remember this, I grew up with a father. So my biological father was a biker. So I had the crazy badass. Yeah. And then my father who raised me from the age of 5 was in Vietnam. He was a sniper. I was raised in a house with PTSD, a lot of stuff, a lot of demons that, my dad really struggled with. But, I'm so grateful for his military background because he was the one, when I think of giving up, I think my biological father taught me, go head on into the brick wall, don't stop. But my father who raised me, who really has been my dad, he's the one who every time I got beat down, it was get back up. So that military mindset is, people are like, how do you do what you do? And I'm like, I was raised like that.
It's a victor mindset. And this is one of the big things that we are living in a time, especially here in America, where we are developing a nation of victims.
Amen.
And it is being pushed down from the highest levels. The government and a lot of individuals are trying to convince people that, because of your race, creed, color, religion, sex, preference, I don't care about any of that stuff, but you're being told that you're a victim and that you can't get ahead because of these things. And that is such a lie. There are tens of millions of incredibly successful Americans from all walks of life, all races, all creeds, all colors, who have been successful because They had a victor mindset. They
Yeah.
said, I will overcome. And the
Yeah.
power resides in you. And that's what's so amazing. But you're not being told that. And there's all these younger Americans growing
Yeah.
up with this idea that I don't have the power to change my destiny. I have to depend on someone or something else in order for that to happen. That is a lie.
Yeah, it's a belief, right? They've been raised with a belief that they literally don't know they can think and do anything different.
That's right.
And so you had a big challenge that came your way that said you're going to overcome at a whole different level, Jason.
Yeah.
And so what, I mean, because you guys, I mean, you're a Navy SEAL. Mm-hmm. That's kind of like the highest level of badass, in my opinion. I mean, that's pretty serious stuff. Did you dream of being a Navy SEAL when you were a kid?
Yeah, from a very young age. I mean, I grew up in a, like Yedda, like you, I grew up in a military family. And had just grown up with these stories of my grandfather, decorated World War II pilot. My great uncle actually was killed in World War II. My grandmother had remarried, and because my paternal grandfather had passed away, the B-24 pilot, before I ever got to meet him, and the individual I knew as my grandfather was also a World War II veteran. On my mother's side, my maternal grandfather. Had fought with the French because he was French, and they had immigrated over to Canada before I ever was born. So anyways, I grew up with all these stories of military service, and just from a young age, I was like, that's what I want to do. And about 14, I decided to be a SEAL. I am the most unlikely candidate. You know, I'm not a big guy. I'm definitely on the smaller end of the spectrum for SEALs. I'm about, I'm 5'7", and, you know, usually when I'm at my heaviest, about 170 pounds, 175 maybe. So not necessarily what most people think of when they think of SEALs, but I said this is what I was going to do. And my story is a unique story. It is a story of overcoming, obviously, certain odds. You know, I think preconceptions, people have preconceptions. You know, in this life, people want to put you into a box. So, hey, if you're the 95-pound weakling, you'll never become a Navy SEAL. So that's probably one of the first things I had to overcome. I actually got chased out of the recruiting station by the recruiter.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. I started going to the recruiting station when I was about 15, and literally I was in the 95-pound weakling. I was like 5 foot nothing, probably weighed 90 pounds, and I was like, I want to be a SEAL. And this salty,
and he's like, get the hell out of here. You don't have anything we want.
Yeah, he chased me out of there.
Wow.
And I don't know. I have something within me. And I think a lot of people have this, that if you tell me I can't do it, it just fires me up even more to accomplish it.
Yeah. You know, so I'm going to interject because I've always had that too. And there's an actual name for it. I'll send it to you. I just learned this a couple weeks ago.
Well, you said I could curse. I call it the fuck you mentality.
Well, it is. And you rightfully timed. You did that perfectly. Yeah. And you know what? It's actually called self-determination theory. The psychologists have actually studied people with this mindset, and I'm going to call it, forget self-determination, it's the fuck you mindset. And it is, the self-determination theory is that autonomy is really at the core of all of what you do and who you are.
Self-leadership.
And self-leadership. And so it's interesting that this new theory is evolving, and a lot of people used to call me a rebel, and rebel with a cause, and it's what I used to call myself. So it actually is now, science is saying there's a group of us out there in the world, and we're not just outliers anymore. We have value, and even we see it differently. But I'm with you. Somebody says you can't do it, and I'm like, oh crap! Now I got to show you that I can.
Yep. I agree. And there's power in that.
Yeah.
And you have to be careful. I mean, sometimes the FU mentality you have to make sure that it's not spiteful for those individuals. And as I've grown older, I've definitely come to recognize that. Because I think when I was younger, there probably was a little bit of spitefulness in that idea. But I went on, became a SEAL. I was very young. I actually went to SEAL training at 18, graduated SEAL training at 19, and earned my SEAL Trident at 20.
And so I don't know I've seen the movie, right? What was it? Private Jane or who was
G.I. Jane.
G.I. Jane, whatever it was. Yeah. I'm sure Hollywood doesn't really do it service.
A little bit of hype.
Yeah. How hard is that? Seriously, like what's it like to do that and to say, I got my Navy SEAL Trident?
SEAL training is considered by almost unequivocally the toughest training in the U.S. military. We have about an 80% attrition rate that has remained constant throughout the history of SEAL training, going all the way back to World War II, which was, we weren't SEALs back then. Back then we were called Scouts and Raiders, and those were the individuals who swam across the beaches and did clandestine sabotage operations in World War II, our forefathers. They became the underwater demolition teams, and then in 1962, Kennedy actually commissioned the first SEAL teams. But from World War II on, the training really hasn't changed a whole lot. It's progressed and done a couple of different things. They've incorporated different aspects of it, but the heart and soul of it, how hard it is, a lot of the evolutions they do has been the same, and it has been no matter what the Navy has poured millions and millions and millions of dollars into trying to analyze SEAL candidates to try and reduce the attrition rate to make it more efficient, if you will. And we haven't been able to do it. We've done all this psychological testing. We've done all these things. And the reality is we've come to figure out that you cannot quantify the no-quit gene. That's basically one of the things that we talk about that really makes a good SEAL, because we come from all walks of life. Big, small, rich, poor, black, white, whatever. It doesn't matter.
Did you ever think, though, in the back of your mind, how am I going to get through this? Or was it just like, what was that narrative? What was the thought for you? Were you like, did you have the highs and lows and you were able to manage that thought process?
Yes. Well, I mean, I think for anything you do in life that's really hard, there's always going to be doubts. I mean, if you think that you're never going to have doubts, that's a lie. Michael Jordan had doubts. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
But the difference between people who are successful and those who are not is you learn to manage those doubts and you drive forward despite the doubts. That is the overcome mindset.
Yeah.
We all have doubts, even to this day. I mean, things that I'm doing, I'm like, I wonder, can I still do this? Or the comparison mentality, any of those things.
Yeah.
Man, that person's crushing it so easy and I'm really struggling. Should I really be doing this? Well, ignore those. Quiet that inner voice. Quiet
the fear-driven voice is
exactly.
It's how I say it in my book.
Forward. Yeah.
Because that's the narrative that I say, you got to say, shut up and sit down, because we're not listening to that fear today. We're moving on. There's something bigger and greater that we're moving towards.
And another thing that sets us up for failure, if you're not careful with that, is what I call unrealistic expectations. Mm-hmm. So you go into something, SEAL training, for instance, and you have these expectations of how it's going to unfold or the level of adversity, how hard it is, any of these things. And sometimes if that doesn't unfold in the manner that you thought it was going to in your mind, it will really mess you up. And that's the only time that I almost quit. I almost allowed unrealistic expectations to take me down. And I tell this story in my second book, Overcome. I had been told so back up for 1 second, the biggest obstacle in SEAL training is an evolution called Hell Week, and it is hands down regarded throughout the U.S. military and even in other nation military training to be one of the hardest blocks of training out there. And it is a week that you go with super arduous physical activity. You're constantly wet, coated in sand, which causes tremendous chafing and discomfort. It's not uncommon for guys to literally chafe holes in their flesh. It's not uncommon for the hair on your scalp to get rubbed raw because you're carrying around a boat with your hat on that's wet and coated in sand, and it almost acts like sandpaper carrying this boat around on your head for a week straight. You get no sleep, maybe if you're lucky, 2 hours of sleep for the entire week. It is brutal,
shit.
brutal. It's not uncommon for your fingernails and toenails to pop off because you never get a break and you're just wet for a week straight in salt water. Brutal. So 80% attrition rate during Hell Week alone.
And how far in is Hell Week? Like, do you cut these guys out pretty early on, or have they been in for a while and they're like, I might make this?
So it's the 6 week. So when I went through, it was the 6th week of training. I think now it's a little bit earlier. I think it's the 4th week of training. Mm-hmm. So, and it is the big weed out crucible. It is designed to weed out the weak or the individuals who just don't have that gene. Or don't have the mindset that we need within the SEAL teams right at the beginning.
Yeah.
So when I was getting ready for Hell Week, I had a friend who had gone through a class prior to me. And I remember talking to him before starting, like any of us, before we go through hard things, we want to talk to others and get their experiences and also know, hey, what are the tips and tricks?
Yeah. Like if I get some insider information, I'm going to be good.
Exactly. And he said, hey man, if you make it to Wednesday morning, it gets easier. And I was like, okay, Roger that.
So you went in with that mindset. You're like, I'm good. If I can make it to Wednesday, I'm good.
That was my mindset. And man, I got to Wednesday morning. I remember the sun rising that morning, and the nights are the hardest. The nights are brutal out there. To make it through the night is definitely the biggest obstacle, at least because you're so cold. Your muscles, you will be sore for weeks afterwards from just shaking all the time.
Oh my God.
Your muscles will lock up. I mean, it's just crazy. So
I thought surviving basic training in the Army was something I could put a checkbox next to. Now I'm like, maybe not.
It's tough. Any military training is designed to be tough.
Cow.
I mean, because I went through Ranger School, and I thought Ranger School was going to be a joke after SEAL training. Ranger School is really hard. So my hat's off to anybody who's graduated Ranger School. It is tough training. But so the sun rose on Wednesday morning, and I'm like, oh, like angels singing, I'm like telling buddies, I'm like, hey man, it's all downhill from here. It gets easy now. And it did not.
Did it get harder?
It did. As a matter of fact, Thursday night was my hardest night of training. In SEAL training, we have a motto: it pays to be a winner. So if you win races, if you win an evolution, you are rewarded for that.
Yeah.
Flip side of the coin, if you come in last, you are punished for that.
Yeah.
And my boat crew, and I think people always enjoy this, in SEAL training, the boat crews go by height so that you're able to carry the boat on an even level.
Yeah.
Well, I was in the shortest boat crew, which is called the Smurf crew. And the Smurf crew was losing every race, and we were being punished over and over and over and over again. And on top of that, the temperature in San Diego, I went through Hell Week in March of 95. And the temperature had plummeted. It had gotten cold. It was in the 40s that night. And all of that came together. It was like this perfect storm of unrealistic expectations, supposed to get easy after Wednesday, even colder than it already was. And we were failing every race. And I remember very vividly, at one point, one of the punishments was to stand on top of the 10-meter dive platform at the pool. And I'm standing up there, and I'm wearing nothing but a pair of these really thin little tri-shorts, and soaking wet, and I had no body fat whatsoever, and the wind's howling off the bay, and it's like 48 degrees.
And are you standing with your arms out like that?
Yeah,
that sucks, because I'm going to tell you, just the holding your arms up like that, in addition to all the other, I mean, your body is like, Yeah,
and it's on Thursday, so I haven't slept in 80 some hours, 90 some hours. Yeah, over 90. Yeah, it would have been at that point. It was almost 90 hours. So, and I was ready to quit. At one point, I remember thinking to myself, make it a Wednesday morning and it gets easier, and I'm like,
you wanted that guy's number, right?
Yeah.
You're like, you lied.
I'm quitting. But one of the big things, and this is really important, it's one of the things that I teach in my new book, having a mission in your life and understanding the destination of where you want to go is so critical. It's so powerful.
Yeah.
Because what I realized, I was ready to quit, but I was like, well, my destination and my mission is to become a SEAL. And making it through Hell Week is only a waypoint on this course to arrive at that destination. And if I quit, I never make it to the destination. This is merely a waypoint. I've got to get to this next waypoint. And there will always be... There will be easy and hard paths on your course to that destination. And this was unequivocally a hard part. I knew it. And to think anything otherwise was unrealistic.
So you say mission, and you know this from our work together and the book. So in the beginning of the book, and our listeners and my readers and clients know this, you say mission, I say vision. It doesn't matter. The language is, where are you? Where do you want to go? And the point between here and there is a moment by moment decision.
Absolutely.
And that's where am I going? And if you don't have any focus and clarity, I call it a love-based vision of what is it that you are in love with and love to do, and where do you see yourself going? If you don't have that, I mean, the wind will blow you in 50 different directions.
You're a ship adrift. And that's what I tell people also, mission, purpose, vision, all synonymous. I teach how to define a mission. Mine are called the point man principles. And point man being a leader of yourself. But at the end of the day, it's knowing that. And so many times in my life, that's what's kept me on course. That's what's
Yeah.
kept me focused and driving forward and driven that overcome mindset, because I was able to say, well, if I quit or if I stop or if I do this or do that, one, it's not fulfilling my mission. So
Yeah.
point man principle number one is relentless belief in the mission.
Yeah.
So you have to build a purpose, passion, vision,
Yeah.
mission that you believe in. And then that's going to guide you in those hard times. You're able to lean on it. So
Yeah. So you become a SEAL.
I became a SEAL.
And you were like, it's great, and life is going to be great, and everything's going to be great. And so
And it was.
it was.
For a while.
Yeah, you got married, you had a family. Did you have kids before you got injured?
I did.
Okay.
But here's the important thing. And I'm so glad that you kind of tried to rush forward to my
Well, you
injuries.
know me. Everybody wants. They're like, Yedda, you need to slow down. I like things fast and hard, and
No.
you got to back me up a little bit,
Well,
Jason.
here's the reason why. Most people wrongly assume that my injuries, and I'll cut to the chase and we'll come back
Yeah.
full circle, but I was shot 8 times in a machine gun ambush, including a round to the face in a gunfight in Iraq in 2007. And most people automatically assume, gosh, that must have been the hardest thing that's ever happened to you. And it was brutal. 4 years, 40 surgeries, ended my operational career. But it wasn't the hardest thing that's happened to me.
Really?
So we have to go back.
Yeah, so,
almost
yeah.
3 years prior to my injuries, I had a big failure as a leader, as a young SEAL leader. So I'd accelerated. So I made it to become a SEAL. You know, I'm living my dream. I'm living my mission. I'm traveling all over the world, doing these incredible things. I mean, at 20 years old, I'm doing counter drug missions down in South America and you know, trusted with tremendous responsibility for working with other individuals and international strategic missions for, you know, our nation, and working with partner, you know, foreign countries and doing all these different things, trusted with millions of dollars in equipment. And I was accelerating. I was doing well. And I got recommended. I was an instructor for a while, and then I got recommended for a commissioning program. And I got commissioned.
And commission, for those of us that are listening that don't know what that means, what does commission mean?
So, yeah, sorry, great point. Sorry about that. So in the military, we have enlisted members. And if you will look at it like enlisted members are in some ways workers, if you will. Although this is a really, I don't even...
Yeah, it's a tough one to try to explain to you,
Yeah.
like what's enlisted versus commission. But yeah, just
workers, subject matter expertise. And I will tell you, the military has really changed dynamically because a lot of your enlisted guys and gals now are so far educated and so far talented. Many of them have bachelor's, if not master's, when they come in as enlisted. So anyways.
So because when I went in as an enlisted, I couldn't go in and be commissioned because I didn't have a college degree. I had a GED. I was a high school dropout. So even if I wanted, so commission means being an officer.
That's right.
So I couldn't
And an
do
officer
that
is
because
more
that's
of
required.
Technically a leader / manager, although you have to be a leader as an enlisted individual also.
Yeah.
So
It's kind of like the executive structure in the civilian world. If you have a college degree and you're a CEO or you want to be a CFO, and that's kind of the commission space. And then the enlisted is, like you said, the people that are hired for subject matter experts, that we don't require certain degrees or things that we would at an executive level. And that's a very simple, and there's a lot of
that's a better
simple
definition than
ways
what I
of
did.
trying
Yeah.
to put it. But so you had an opportunity to be a commissioned officer.
I did. So they recommended me for a commissioning program within the Navy, and I got selected and approved for it. I went to school, and then I got a little bit off course. And this is a danger that a lot of young leaders make the mistake, and sometimes older leaders, more often in males. I don't see this quite as often in females, but I started to walk with two dangerous friends on the path as I was growing. As I was growing in leadership and capability and successes and accolades, I started to walk with two poor friends. And these friends are called ego and arrogance. And I started to think pretty highly of my own leadership abilities. And by the time
I'm a female, and I'm going to tell you, I know ego and arrogance pretty well too.
I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but I see it more in guys.
Yeah.
I see it more in guys. You know,
Mine did a big old belly flop off the high dive into the pool, and there was no water.
Yeah, I was right there with you.
We were probably holding hands.
I was right there with you because I got commissioned, and I came back and I had excelled. Like, I mean, I graduated #1 out of my ROTC unit. I was the battalion commanding officer when I left out of the largest ROTC consortium on the East Coast. And I came back to the SEAL teams thinking, I'm going to be God's gift to leadership. I'm going to like become the Patton of the SEAL teams.
Yeah.
I mean, ridiculous. And there was a perfect storm that occurred while I was at school that I was somewhat aware of, but not fully aware of. 9/11 happened while I was at school. So we had gone from a peacetime military to a wartime military, which is drastically different.
Yeah.
And the SEAL teams prior to 9/11, the last time we had seen sustained combat was Vietnam. So you had a whole lot of guys in the SEAL teams that had done a ton of training and preparation, but didn't have, there was only a very small percentage that had combat experience, including me. I'd been shot at in Colombia, but not sustained combat operations. So I came back commissioned thinking I'm going to be God's gift to leadership. Well, in that time frame, I suddenly stepped into platoons where I was leading guys who had combat experience. And not only did they have combat experience, but a lot of the tactics and techniques I had learned as a young enlisted guy had drastically changed. We figured out that on the battlefields of Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of the methodologies and tactics that we were using in Vietnam did not work in Iraq and Afghanistan. This hardcore urban warfare, mountain warfare, close quarters combat, very different in the jungles of Iraq. The jungles of Vietnam to the deserts and mountains of Iraq and Afghanistan. So I came back thinking I knew all these things, and I didn't. And this is where ego and arrogance did me in. Instead of humbling myself and saying, hey, man, I know I'm supposed to be this ex-enlisted officer that knows a lot, but everything's changed. Like, I really could use your help.
Yeah.
I wouldn't let my ego support that.
Yeah.
So I was hanging on so tight.
Yeah.
And was messing up right and left on trying to learn these new tactics and be a leader. And then I did what so many of us do when we're struggling. I started to self-medicate. And I started drinking too much. And all of it became this perfect storm where, I got known as a drunk. I talked a lot about being a good leader, but I wasn't living it. I wasn't leading myself.
So there was a division. There was no authenticity. The walk and the talk.
Hey, look at me. I'm a leader, but I wasn't living it. And this gets into how I developed my rules of leadership, the 3 rules of leadership. All of it culminated with a bad call on a mission in Afghanistan. And thankfully, knock on wood, no one was lost on that mission, but it could have been. I mean, I could have gotten either myself or specifically a machine gunner and I tell this whole story in the Trident, killed. And it didn't happen, but what it did do is it destroyed my professional credibility as a leader. The guys said, we don't want to work with that guy. And fortunately, in the SEAL teams, a lot of times we call our enlisted dudes sled dogs because they're the dudes that pull and make stuff happen, and they're amazing. And if they say, I don't want to work with that leader because they're incompetent or they're
going to kill me or someone else,
the leadership will listen and say, hey, we're going to move this guy to a non-operational position, which in our community is everything. I mean, if you are a special operations warrior, we are operational. We go in and go after the enemy. And if you're told as a leader that you don't cut the mustard, they'll just move you out and phase you out. And that's pretty much what happened. I got called before what we call a Trident Review Board, or not a Trident Review Board. They talked about a Trident Review Board, which is where you have the potential for them to take your Trident. And basically I had guys say, we don't want to work with this guy. Yeah. And that was probably the most crushing blow as this was all starting to happen.
But you say that's the hardest thing you've ever...
Coming back from that, I'll be honest, when it happened, I actually put a gun in my mouth and almost killed myself. That's how difficult it was.
Because that was your identity. That was
absolutely.
And that's the trick of the ego. This is who you are. There is nothing else.
And brutal. And thankfully I didn't do that. And that's a whole nother conversation about mental health and suicide. And I speak often about that also. I didn't, and I'm thankful because it is the hardest and longest road I've ever walked. It took probably 2 years to rebuild my reputation and credibility. And, but I did it, and it happened inch by inch by inch. And this is why I tell so many people that I meet who have had a failure. You've lost your business, maybe your marriage crumbled, maybe you did something, you made a mistake. It's never too late to fix it.
No.
That's a lie we convince ourselves of. And I'm living proof, man. And one of the hardest environments out there to rebuild my reputation in the special operations community, I did it.
I love that you're telling that because, for our listeners, our viewers, we've known each other for many years and of course came together in your Wounded Warrior and in creating the Overcome Academy and working together on things like that. And the story of your injury and your wounding is kind of the front and center, and people are like, holy shit, this guy shot how many times and he survived. And, but I'm loving, and this is true. So I want you all to hear this because Jason and I've talked a lot over the years, and I never really talked about that self-destruction of my own ego, and you and I've never really talked about it together until right now. And what I'm loving about this is you're right. It's the hardest thing I ever had to do when everything, whatever the story is, when you lose everything who you thought you were, for me, it was ending a 20-year marriage. It was, my work. It was all these things just started crumbling. And we don't talk about that in the mainstream, about what it takes to wake up every day and bet on you when nobody else will. And it's hard fucking work.
Yeah.
And you think you're alone, and you think you can't talk to anybody about it, and you just keep one foot. And I honor when people tell me that story and hearing your story, that they could overcome that, then anything becomes possible. So I'm glad you brought that up. Absolutely. Because we've never really gone into that dialogue, because people think it's overcoming the physical tragedy that you dealt with, but you were already prepared for that years prior with this overcome.
It set me up for success, actually, of my injuries. I'm so thankful it happened because it humbled me. It made me realize I wasn't as great as I thought I was. It made me really dive deep in what it is to be a leader. And now it's the foundational aspects of what I teach. The 3 rules of leadership. Number 1, first and foremost, is lead yourself. 70% of leadership is how you lead yourself. Mm-hmm. Number 2, how we lead others. Number 3, we lead always, regardless of the situations that is occurring. So those things never would have happened if I had not had that leadership failure. And I want to touch on something you said. It is a long, dark, lonely road. And we convince ourselves that you have to do it totally alone. And that's a little bit of a lie also. There are people who will believe in you, and there are mentors that you can find that will help you out of that. I'm one of them. That's one of the things that I talk about. I help people out of failure.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough that my leader that I stepped into my next platoon after that failure sat me down right in the beginning and said, hey, Red, I know what I heard what happened in Afghanistan. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't care. He said,
he believed in you.
It starts right now. He said, I'm going to give you opportunities to lead. He said, I'm going to give you opportunities to follow. He said, I just want you to step up and learn. And he said, and I'm going to help you to do that. And he did, man. When no one else really believed in me, and you talk about, I got the cold shoulder. I would walk into a platoon space and the guys would stop talking and just kind of look at me like, why are you here? I felt it for at least a year, and then the ice started to thaw, and by my leader believing in me and putting me in complex, chaotic training scenarios where I got to prove I had the ability to do this job and lead at a high level, and then how I just continued to focus on the 3 rules. Lead yourself. No matter what, always go back to rule number 1, and that's what I focus on.
Right here. The inner freedom is right here. It's what I talk about with my clients too, that thinking, feeling, behaving. What are you thinking? Shut up and sit down and ask yourself, what stories are you telling yourself? You're the only one that can master your mind. Period. End of discussion. And when you do that, everything else begins to be something that you can actually deliberately create, so you become the victor and you can overcome versus the victim and you're powerless and you're helpless.
Great victim-victor story, and actually it saved my career. I wrote about it in a book about gratitude, that I think it is a pivotal moment in my life. So part of getting in trouble, there were certain punishments, growth moments, however you want to call them. I viewed them as punishments. Now I look back and they helped me grow. I got sent to U.S. Army Ranger School. Ranger School is a leadership school at its heart and soul. And instead of being happy about it and being like, hey man, here's an opportunity that I can really show I have the ability to lead, I continued to see myself as a victim, that I had been thrown under the bus, you were
looking at lack and absence and fear instead of opportunity, abundance, and direction. Yeah.
So I went to Ranger School with a bad attitude, continuing to heavily drink leading up to it. I went into it with, once again, unrealistic expectations. I said, man, I've made it through SEAL training. You know, I'm going to crush Ranger School. Ranger School is really hard. And,
I know a few Rangers.
Yeah. So I showed up with this bad attitude, unwilling to work with others, and just thinking it was going to be this walk in the park. And I failed the land navigation course on day 3 or 4 of Ranger School. And the instructors started heckling me and giving me grief about it. And this was a moment I talk about Pentagon of Peak Performance, emotional leadership. It was a moment of extreme emotional leadership weakness, because I blew up on them and basically said, screw you. You can take this course and shove it up your ass. And they were like, are you quitting? And I was like, yes, I'm out of here. And so for a short period of time, I quit Ranger School.
Wow.
And they said, okay, you got to meet the colonel the next day. So the next day I had to go meet the colonel. And now I'm like, what have you done? Like, dude, you have the self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, everybody said you're a dumbass, you're a terrible leader, and you just lived it. The one thing you can't do in the SEAL teams is quit.
Yeah.
And I quit. And I'm thinking, this is it. My career's over. Like, they're going to kick me out, and this is the end. And I went and met the colonel, and I really didn't have much to say. I'd already resigned that my career was over. And I was just like, hey, man, just process me out.
I'm going to go
whatever
home. Whatever we got to do here.
What
do you need me to sign? Like, what's happening?
And this is one of these pivotal moments, a God moment, if you believe in that, a fate moment, serendipity, whatever it is. But this Ranger Colonel, KK Chin in his name, so General Chin and I have actually become friends. But he saved my career. And he happened to be friends with a senior SEAL officer who was my officer, who recommended me for a commission, and probably one of the most legendary. I write about him a lot in the book. Vince Peterson is his name in the Trident. And he happened to be friends with Vince Peterson and said, hey, I'm friends with this senior. He didn't tell me who it was in the moment. He just said, hey, I'm friends with this senior officer, really respected. Do you want to talk to somebody from your community? And I was like, no. I was so ashamed. I didn't want to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
Like, just process me out. Let me move on with my life, And he's like dialing the phone. And years later, I've talked to him, and he said, no, I did not coordinate this ahead of time. I just happened to call him, and he happened to be at his desk and answer the phone.
Yeah.
And they talked for a moment, and he handed me the phone, and I was a victim in my mind. And I told him, hey, I messed up. All these things happened. And, the reality is I'm never going to be able to recover from this. The guys are never going to follow me again. All these lies we tell ourselves, this negative. I was sitting on the X, just feeling sorry for myself, wallowing in my misery, victim. And this is where the first rule of leadership comes from. He goes, Red, he said, people will follow you if you give them a reason to. He said, I don't care how much you've ever messed up. If you are consistently setting the example, it's human nature. We will follow those who are leading, who are making a difference, who are doing things. And it will take more time if you've messed up, just like it took me over a year to build back the credibility with my teammates. But once you do it, people will naturally follow you. And he said, go back to that Rangers, go back to that course. And he said, kick it in the ass and come back to the SEAL teams and give guys a reason to follow you. And it was the spark I needed to get off the X.
And he believed in you. And, you say something that's interesting. I'm glad you brought that up, because I had my parents, who my mom and her husband, Bob, who really believed in me. And so when you have people, so that's all I had. Everybody else, and my son, everybody else had given up on me. I had given up on me. And when somebody else in your life holds space and sees the potential for what you have, because they don't see those beliefs and those demons and those narratives in your head, they see the truth of who you really are. And it is a spiritual space. And it is, I call them God moments too. There's a dignity and divinity to everything happening. I believe that. And those moments you have a choice. You have free will. Are you going to step in?
I love it.
Are you going to step in and do something with it?
I speak about this in my presentations. You have a choice.
Yeah,
it is the greatest gift you have as a human being.
Always.
Anytime adversity comes along, you have a choice in how you're going to deal with it. You can be a victor or a victim.
Yeah. And so you made the choice. And so it's usually one or two people at most who hold space. So these guys saw in you what you couldn't see in yourself in that moment. And that really gives us hope and allows us to continue on the growth. And so in that space that you were in, as you were going through that, you go back, you kick ass, and now you get this resurgence of, and you're breaking down old belief systems. Your egos, it's, I don't like to call it the death of the ego anymore. I used to use that language, but now what I do is I say, I didn't kill my ego. For a while, I thought I had to beat her away, shut her up, and put her in a box and say, you can never come out. What I had to learn was we got to work together.
Yeah.
It takes a strong ego to do this work, to come back and integrate and do what you did. And it's when other people see and believe in us that we begin to see and believe in ourselves.
It's a wiser, more mature ego, because you can't change. You can't just kill a part of yourself.
We're going to have egos until we die, because it keeps us from walking out in traffic and killing ourselves. It lifts the fork up. It washes our face in the morning. I mean, that's all ego.
And there are strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
So you're going to have strong parts. You're going to have weak parts. And you can strengthen them and you can reduce them, but they're always going to be there. You just got to learn to manage them.
And I love in your story that you were, and this is true for what's in the book. The only reason I wrote the book and put this kind of process together, if you will, it's not follow me, I'm the guru, follow you, you're the guru. It was, there are ways to go within, to shut up, to sit down, to rewrite your narrative, to change your behaviors, and it's all up to you. You are, I love this, and one of the thought leaders out there says, you know what the definition of guru is? G, you are you. And I went, oh, you are you. You have it inside of you. You don't have to follow anybody. You have to go within, not go without into the world, because everybody out there is going to tell you can't at some level.
Well, and I think that's I think both you and I think a lot of people like this about us, and I've heard it so often with me, and it's something I tell people, that nothing I teach, everything that I teach were systems and processes I had to develop in my own life to overcome all the different challenges and my, weaknesses or egos or problems. So it's all stuff that I've used. I mean, anything that I teach, there's a story that goes behind it. Like, this is why I had to create this, because I was out of balance, or I was, I'd failed as a leader. And I think that's what's critical, because there's a lot of people out there that get up and speak, and I'm kind of amazed.
It's do it my way. If you do what I did, you'll get what I get. And the truth is, that's actually not true.
Yeah, they're regurgitating somebody else's content that they've never applied into their own life.
Yeah.
And And
I love what you said. And Ken Blanchard, who I was able to work with in my early 20s, which was another God moment for me, literally looked at me one day, and he's the author of The 1 Minute Manager, very big in the corporate leadership world. And I'm in my early 20s and, brand new parent, young wife. And he looked at me and he said, you're a leader not because you get up and tell people to follow you, Yedda. You're a leader because you get up and people choose to follow you.
Rule number 1, lead yourself.
Yeah. And I remember thinking, whoa. And the other thing was, he said, and you have a moral obligation. Whatever I do to help and teach you, you have to promise me you will do to help and teach others. So now people like you and I, who I call wounded warriors, who now go out, wounded healers really, go out in the world, we have stories. And I want you guys to hear that. I mean, that's some heavy stuff to have somebody who literally, you were shot in the face by a machine gun, fighting for our country, protecting our lives. You're sitting here saying that wasn't the hardest thing I had to deal with, Yedda. The death, or the kind of fragmentation and kind of integration of my ego and my inner world was it.
Yeah.
And that's why there's this work is out here, and why you're doing your version, you've got your stuff, and we're all saying the same thing. We're just doing it in different ways for different audiences. The world is ready to wake up. People want to wake up. They just are in the illusion. I say they're in the trance. They're running around on autopilot. They don't know. And that pattern interruption, that breaking, suffering is usually what gets our attention and says, and now you're ready. Because now you're broken and you can pick it up and rebuild it.
People are hungry for 2 things in this world right now. They're hungry for leadership, and they're hungry for resiliency. And what they don't realize is both of those things reside in you. You've been told lies. You've been told that somebody else needs to lead you. You've been told that you're a victim. These are all lies, man. Wake up and start leading yourself. I mean,
And you're right. So it's a belief system. You're doing your part, I'm doing mine. We're all doing our part to help people build beliefs that they can do that. And you know something that you said too, before we get into the story, because I know I want you to share the part of your powerful story that it is kind of out there in your speech and commercial is kind of how you handled the actual physical injury. But before we jump into that, you mentioned a few times about expectations. You had these expectations. And in mindfulness, and I love the concept of mindfulness and shutting up and sitting down, it's self-inquiry, metacognition, which is I'm thinking about what I'm thinking about. You know how to do all this. That's why I love people like you who love that complex conversational space, because we go within and we want to do this work. But mindfulness and shutting up and sitting down and going within and getting quiet is you are already getting a lesson in how to let go of expectations. Life was teaching you that. So you don't have to go, I tell people this, I'm not asking people to give up their religion and join an ashram and shave their head and let go of all their belongings. That's not a good look on me. I kind of like, I like living in the world a little bit. So mindfulness, this ability for you to discern, to not be attached to outcomes, was what I heard you say was a really critical place too, that you had to learn. And the ego doesn't like that place because it wants to know, it wants to be able to predict, to control, to analyze. And as a Navy SEAL, you got to have both. You got to do that. And then it's letting go and then saying, but there are some things I don't know. And that can put the ego into a tailspin.
Yeah, we want instant gratification and we want comfort.
Yeah.
And the reality is you don't build an overcome mindset with those two things.
No.
It takes time and it takes being willing to be uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable for a year of dealing with teammates who did not believe in me and didn't want me as a leader.
Yeah.
It was uncomfortable when I was wounded and I was going through 4 years of surgeries and, having to come to grips with my operational career was over.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. I do want to talk about that for a minute on, you had an injury. Tell us a little bit about that and then where that's led you in the next part of your journey.
Yeah. So I won't get into all the details. Long story short, I had gotten my career back on track. I had been in some pretty intense situations in combat in Iraq. I'd earned back the credibility and respect of my teammates. They said, hey, this guy could do it. And had already been given the thumbs up for my next leadership position. I was actually in the process of screening for our next tier of SEAL team. So man, the world was beautiful.
You were back on top.
I was back on top. And a week before coming home, we stepped into a vicious enemy ambush going after a senior Al-Qaeda leader. And I was shot 8 times in the engagement between my body armor and body. 2 rounds in the left elbow and a round in the face. And found myself 96 hours after that event laying in a hospital bed in Bethesda, Maryland, and just overwhelmed with what had happened. Like here I was at the height of my career. I'd gone through this tremendously hard journey of building back my professional reputation, suddenly to be laying in a hospital bed and being inundated with information that often happens when what I call a life ambush occurs. We're just overwhelmed with all the negativity that's occurring. And I'm being told, you've been all shot up. I'm being told it's going to take years to put you back together. I'm being told your elbow is destroyed. You have no use of your left hand. We're thinking about amputating your arm. I'm being told you've been shot in the face. You are trached. You are wired shut. We're feeding you through a stomach tube. The amount of blood loss you've sustained, you're too weak to get out of bed. So, we're having to take care of you with all of the things that go along with that. And I remember at one point laying there thinking to myself, so my operational career is over. I'm going to be permanently disabled and I'm going to be forever disfigured. And that was brutal. And it's a really important thing because when I talk about the overcome mindset and I talk about getting off the X, sometimes I think people think it's an instantaneous thing. And there will be a time and place, especially in emergency situations where it needs to be instant. But other times when major life ambushes occur in your life, there is going to be a little period of time that you have to process. And I teach something called the REACT methodology and how we do that. That period of time is relative. If you lose a child, that is going to be a much longer time period that you're going to be processing as opposed to if you're in a gunfight, I need to move really quick to get out of this gunfight. So anyways, I say that because it took probably a week for me to kind of process what had happened. But finally, something happened that kind of knocked me off the X and made me kind of say, hey, dude, you've been through worse. You know how to lead yourself. It's time to do it. So,
and when you say knocks you off the X, because you've said it a few times. So for folks that don't know that, when you're on the X, that's the target.
The X, so the X is a military term, and it is the target, but it is the point of attack, is the point of a crisis, it's the point of an ambush, and I now use it synonymous with any time in your life you have something go catastrophically wrong. I call them life ambushes now.
Okay.
So I survived an enemy ambush, but everybody in life gets ambushed.
Yeah.
You know, I got hit by the bullets and bombs of combat, but every one of you have been hit, or I got bad news, you're going to be hit by the bullets and bombs of life.
Okay. So the X is get off the X, get out of the line of fire.
The point of the attack.
Yeah.
And the thing is, here's something to understand. It may not, oftentimes we will place ourselves on the X because we get that victim mindset.
Yeah.
And
It's a belief. We don't even realize we're standing and we're co-creating the very shit that we've been telling people for 10 years we're trying to get out of.
And very often there's two phases to ambushes. There'll be the primary life ambush. So let's just hypothetically say it is the loss of a child, because I've seen this occur. And the secondary phase is the aftermath of that occurring. And so often people will lay down on the X because of that. And then we start to devolve into really bad habits. Like everything, that becomes an excuse for every bad habit that, you know, we start self-medicating heavily. We maybe
shopping,
it destroys
addiction,
whatever it
sex,
is, sexual
whatever,
all of these things become like because of that.
Because we're numbing and we don't know how to deal with our suffering. We're in it and we're just locked in and we don't even know how to get out of it sometimes.
Absolutely.
So you're saying get off the X. So
that's my motto. If you want to build an overcome mindset, always have it in your mind that no matter what ambush comes, I've got to get off the X as quickly as possible. And I realized that laying in that hospital bed, the thing that bumped me into getting off the X and realizing this was, after all of this had occurred, a few days later, I had some individuals that had come into the room, and I was kind of drifting off, and they were having a conversation by themselves, but I heard it. And the conversation went along these lines. Oh, what a shame, what a pity. We send these young men and women off to war, and they come back broken and battered, and they're never going to be the same. It was this entire victim pity party mindset. Like they'll never be successful because of what happened to them, because we sent them off to war and they got banged up. And when they left, I remember my wife came back into the room and I wrote to her. I couldn't talk. I wrote to her. I said, never again, never again. It was kind of the spark I needed to wake me up and say, hey man, you're a leader. You know how to lead yourself. And I realized that you can lead from any situation, even from a hospital bed. It's your attitude that's going to determine the outcome. And choosing positivity in the face of negativity is one of the most powerful things you can do, not only for yourself, but for the ripple effects it has on the people around you. And I wrote to her, I said, let me have my pen and paper.
And this is what you wrote.
This is what I wrote. I said, never again is somebody going to come in here, because I refuse to feel sorry for myself. I will not be a victim. I will be a victor. And I wrote this sign, and it said, attention to all who enter here. If you're coming in this room with sadness or sorrow, don't bother. The wounds that I received, I got in a job that I love, doing it for people that I love, defending the freedom of a country that I deeply love. I will make a full recovery. What is full? That's the absolute utmost physically. I have the ability to recover, and then I will push that about 20% further through sheer mental tenacity. This room you're about to enter is a room of fun, optimism, and intense rapid regrowth. If you're not prepared for that, go elsewhere. And we signed it, the management. I don't know why. It was funny at the time, but
and you put that on your hospital room door.
I put it on my door, and it achieved a life of its own. It's
all over the internet. You guys sell these now.
Viral.
People can,
President Bush signed it. It now hangs. The actual real sign on the door hangs in the Wounded Ward at Walter Reed. Where it belongs, because I felt like it wasn't mine. It belonged to these guys and gals. But
like, I feel like I want to get out of the chair and sit on the floor at this point in the talk, you guys, because like that's other level, like leadership shit. I mean, really, Jason, it really is.
And I realized it in that hospital bed. I realized, so you've been through phase 1 of leadership growth, that leadership failure. But guess what? This is phase 2. This is the epitome of rule number 3. lead always.
Yeah.
And what I realized is in my new Point Man Planner, I talk a lot about it's in the hardest moments where it's the most difficult to muster the critical traits we need as a leader, to push through the negativity, to push through the adversity. We all turn inward, and I was doing it. I was laying in that bed feeling sorry for myself for the first week. And I have a saying, if you are going to be a point man, a leader for your own life, when the storms come, you have to be the light in the darkness.
Yeah.
You have to create your own light. And what it does is it creates light for others. All around me in that hospital were young wounded warriors who had been blown up, burned, missing limbs, traumatic brain injuries. And already in the first week that I was there, I had these individuals who wanted to come meet me because I was a SEAL, and there is a level of prestige that goes with a SEAL. Well, there was an additional level because I was a SEAL officer. So they expected me to be a leader. They could care less what happened to me. And I hate to tell you, as a leader, that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
They don't know what life ambushes you're going through. They don't know what baggage. They don't know that you're on the X. They're looking to you to lead. And this is where that lead always analogy comes from. So I realized, hey man, this is the next level of leadership. If you believe in everything that you now are trying to live, lead yourself, lead others, lead always, then guess what? Now's the time to do it. You need to be this light in the darkness. You need to set the example. You need to lift others up. You need to be the positivity in the face of negativity. And that became my new mission.
Yeah.
And that's what that sign represents.
And I mean, we could just sit in silence in your presence at this point. And we really, no, I mean, it's no joke, you guys. I mean, now you know why I said if shit hits the fan, you live close enough. I can't give your address out. You live close enough that I'm coming to get behind you. And the courage and the there's just no words, really, honestly. And all that you went through to write that sign, and you could have just stayed in that world. And then you grew and evolved through 4 years of surgeries, 40 surgeries, you said, and you kept moving, you kept evolving. And you've written how many books?
My third book, and I've been through 2 additional life ambushes since that sign was written.
Yeah, yeah. And you go out and you still help others, and you're growing and you're leading and you're doing things all over the United States and all over the world to impact people still.
We need leaders. We need individuals. We are in a dark time especially here in America, and I think globally too. It's a weird time, and we need leaders. We need individuals to be the light in the darkness. I'm telling people we need point men.
Yeah.
Point men to step up and lead.
And what's
and
a point man when you think about, so for those again that don't have a military background, what is a point man?
So a point man is an individual in the military that leads us where we need to go, but it goes so much deeper than that. And last year during COVID, so something, very quickly, my 4th life ambush, I got really sick in November of last year. I started dropping weight. I started having I was having balance issues. I couldn't think straight. And they could not figure out what was wrong with me. They looked at my blood. My blood was all messed up, and they thought I had cancer. So I thought I was dying. Finally, they figured it out. I had a parasite, which caused a blood disorder. My body had stopped producing B12, which was attacking my central nervous system. And it was a mess. It was a wreck. While going through that, I remember at one point thinking to myself, God, I wish I was back in the military where I had a point man to lead me out of this, to navigate me out of this ambush. And I was like, well, why? Why were good point men so vital? And it made me realize there's 4 critical principles that a point man, a leader, does in the military. Number 1, relentless belief in mission. They always go back to the mission and it guides them. Number 2, they always have a destination and a course to get there, and they seek out the most efficient course. Number 3, risk assessment of the risks that are out there, and then situational awareness. They're very aware of everything happening around them, and they recognize this could be a potential problem, and they take action on it. And then number 4, they have an overcome mindset to get off the X as quickly as possible. We cannot prevent every ambush that's coming.
Yeah, because we don't see it, because when we're in it, it's hard. As you were talking about that, I was thinking, gosh, so maybe because people ask me, they're like, Yedda, what do you do? And 90% of the time, I'm like, I can't explain that in like a sentence, like I'm a blank. I'm like, but can we sit down and hang out and chit chat and then like kind of, and so I love that language and that point man mentality, because that is important to do. And that is really what people like you and I are doing for our clients that are now working with us, is showing them the way, because we have built up the skills and the capacities to know how to help people go through, you're calling it life's ambushes. I call it limiting beliefs, but that victim mindset at the core of all of that.
Yeah.
And so, because life continues to bring stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Life
ambushes are coming.
Life is hard.
Get ready.
Yeah. And, I say this, and Robin and he and the people that are helping me with the show have heard me say this relentlessly. Pain is inevitable in life. Suffering is optional. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. And the suffering comes from our mindset and the stories we're telling ourselves and others about what we're going through.
Yeah.
And so you've written 3 books, you've overcome lots of things, you're going to continue to overcome, and you're out there, you're helping the world, you've got all kinds of cool stuff that you're working on. And so what's the biggest thing that you've got going right now that you want to share with the folks that are listening and watching?
Definitely the Point Man Planner. That launch, we just launched about a month ago. So it's on Amazon. And if you want to learn how to live your life as a point man, this is a great book, dude. So many people have never defined their mission in this life. And I encourage you to do it. And I walk you through the steps on how to, because I build it on your values. I have exercises and how we build a mission statement on our values. Because you and I both know there's a lot of people that they talk about values, but they've never dug into the weeds. And one of the things I encourage people, hey man, if money is a value of yours, you need to be honest about that.
Yeah.
Because it's going to drive you. And if you ignore that, or, because we live in a society where, anyways, the bottom line is I'm pushing that. We just launched some online courses. I've got How to Build and Overcome Mindset is our new online course, 72 Hours to Peak Performance, which teaches you all about how do I get off the X and how do I build balance through something I call the Pentagon of Peak Performance. Within the next 2 months, we'll be launching Point Man for Life, the virtual course. And then I'm getting ready to be launching a Point Man for Life mastermind. So it'll be a 3-month program where 20 individuals will be able to be part of it. You'll get to work with amazing people, but more importantly, you'll get one-on-one time with me every week. Where we talk about, walk you through the Point Man for Life program on how to live those Point Man principles.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what I love about this is there's more than enough for all of us to go around, meaning, what I say is there's no original idea out there. We're doing the same stuff in similar ways. We're doing different things from our own human story. But ultimately what we're all doing is we're helping people go within to find the wisdom within themselves. And that to me is, if we can help people wake up and find inside of themselves wisdom and how to make decisions and how to lead and how to go out into the world, be more, then the easy part is being kind and being generous and being grateful. And, we're all doing our part. And I love the work that you're doing. I love these stories. And before we go, we've got a little bit more time together, but, not only can you guys, and we'll tell you, how to get in touch with Jason and all that before we wrap up the show. But what I love about this is how you and I've met is collaboration. And in leadership and so what I want our listeners and viewers to hear, and I say this all the time, I don't care who you work with, I don't care who you study with, I don't care who you follow. Here's my number one rule. When they tell you they have the only way and they are your ticket to freedom, run like hell.
Yep.
Because that's still wrapped in ego. And what I love about your work, Jason, is you've did the dark night of the soul several times over. You've gone into the depths and you've come back, and it's not about you, but it is all about you in here.
Yes.
And so when you teach and you guide and you work with people, you're truly empowering them. You're not saying, and I say this, and most people in personal development know who does this, but you're not saying walk across the hot coals and you're healed. You're not saying give me $10,000 and you're fixed. There's a mindset, that one's breaking in leadership development. That's a very ego-based and a very do like I do. You're empowering people to figure it out, to know who they are and how they can show up in the world as a true victor.
Absolutely. And the reality is it most likely already resides in you. I mean, I tell people your scars are your superpower.
Yeah.
So if you can understand that the hard things, most of us, well, let me rephrase that. Most human beings want to put the trauma in a box. As a matter of fact, a great friend of mine wrote a book called Touching the Dragon. He was a SEAL who was wounded, and it's a phenomenal book on overcoming mental health challenges that he had to overcome. But he initially tried to place that trauma in the box, and that's a human thing. So many of us do it.
It's called the shadow self, right? We pack it up, put it away, and put it in the closet, and we're like, don't ever come here. And we live our life protecting and keeping everyone from seeing it, but we live a limited life.
Well, bigger than that, here's the problem with that. And Jimmy Hatch, the book is called Touching the Dragon, James Hatch. I want to give him a shout out. Check it out if you're looking for it. But his analogy is so perfect. The trauma we've all experienced in life is a dragon. And we all think that we can box this dragon up in our mind and chain it up and that it'll never come out. The problem is there are triggers. That dragon gets hungry. And when it smells food or blood, which are triggers that you see in your life, that dragon will break out of that box and then it eats you. So what Jimmy talked about is you have to learn to touch that dragon. And what I tell people is, man, there's so much power in your story. We don't want, it's hard to talk about sexual trauma. It's hard to talk about physical trauma, emotional trauma, financial trauma. I don't care what it is. You know, if you've been through a major life ambush, it's painful to talk about those things. You will always feel the pain when you talk about it, but the power in it for other people is huge, because those scars become a power. It's cathartic.
Yeah, those wounds are the gateway to the wisdom for us all.
And people connect to it.
And we all have wounds, and this is something you and I haven't talked about before, but I'm going to bring this up. And you all know, watching and listening to the show, we always go organic. There's absolutely no editing, and there's none of my guests get a list of questions, or we just sit down, we shut up, we sit. We just roll, we talk. So there's a spiritual component to what I put in my book and in my work, and I know there's a spiritual component for you. And you talked about the light. And actually, before we wrap up, the very last page of my book, I talk about this, that, you know, the work is to go deeper into the darkness, but the deeper you go, you find the lighter it gets.
Yeah.
And that's
because the light comes from you.
Well, the light comes from me, but I believe that when I'm in that space in my own being and I shut up and sit and go within, I tap into not only my mindset, and my mind is, so I have my mind, I have my body, but then that soul, that spiritual aspect of who I really am is the part that speaks to us in silence. And so for me, my spiritual journey on this was, there's something greater than me, in me, working through me and going out into the world. I call that God. Sometimes I use universe or source, because sometimes I can put God into a human form, and that doesn't always serve me. But when I think about that from a spiritual perspective, that's in all of us. And I ask myself this all the time about my wounds, and this is why I'm bringing this up for you. I never really was raised with a belief system that God was experiencing itself through me and experiencing me through others. I never thought about that spiritual space of who I am that's deeper than my mind and than my body. And so for me, getting silent, all of a sudden I would start to hear, not audible, but I would go, I would know the difference between when I was creating a thought or when a thought would create me. And so I'm wondering, in this work and all this work that you're doing around that piece of spiritual kind of just space, because I find when we do this work, we drop deeper into serving something greater than ourselves, our ego, even going out and saving the world and saying, buy our books, this is all great, we've had these great overcome. Do you find that you're connected and tethered to something deeper when you touch those scars and those wounds on a spiritual basis, now that you've been through all of this and you kind of look back and go, whoa, because you called them God moments. What's that space for you?
Well, for me, it becomes living a second chance and helping others to get off that X. I mean, that gets pretty deep when you look into it. I truly believe, I don't know why God saved me. There's a lot of much better SEALs who are dead, who name is engraved on granite in various places across this country. And every time I look at a granite wall with teammates' names on it, I'm like, why am I not on it? Which further fuels me to say, okay, you've got to get back. You've got to live better. You have to be the light in the darkness, because they're not here to do that. And they would give anything. Their families would give anything for them to be here. So that's one. Two, it became my new mission. So when you look at my mission statement, and then a secondary part of mission statement that I have people develop in the Point Man Planner is what I call life's mission objective. Mine all have a little bit of a military twist, but life's mission objective is the legacy that you're going to leave behind. There's one fact in this life: we're all going to die someday. I hate to tell you.
Yeah, none of us are getting out of here alive.
Nope. So what do you want to leave behind? Is it your kids? Is it, greater than that? Is it some sort of business legacy, if you will? And I talk about that. How do you live your life so that you're always contributing to your legacy? And that became mine. My goal is for everyone I meet, I pray and hope that they will walk away and say, wow, that guy made me better. That's my goal. I don't always accomplish it. I fail at times. I've got plenty of haters out there, but that's okay because I don't focus on that. I focus on, okay, how can I give back? How can I continue to try and help people off this X? How can I take my scars and make them relate to other people who go, wow. I mean, this just happened just recently. I spoke at an event and connected with a guy. We talked after the event, and then he wrote me. He wrote me about a month later, and he said, hey, man, I want to let you know that you changed my life. He said that at that event, I realized I was on the X. I realized I was an alcoholic. And he said, and it had been ruining my life, but I was in denial about it. He said, it ruined relationships. It ruined all kinds of things. And he said, I finally came to grips with the fact that I was sitting on the X, and, I had this victim mindset. He said, I'm writing you from rehab. And he said, I am reading your book and I am getting off this X and taking my life back and leading myself. And it's moments like that I'm like, wow, man, that's awesome. Like my story and the things that I'm trying to teach help someone be better.
Isn't that, and it's a different feeling when I hear that from people, and when I hear you talk about when you hear that from people, that doesn't hit your ego. That goes to a place of for me, and I know for you, like it's a place of humility, a place of, I had no idea that something that happened to me could help somebody else, that my suffering, my deepest pain could free someone else. And that's true for all of us. We all have wounds. We all have stories. The world needs all of our wisdom.
Yeah.
And so when you hear that and someone, years ago, I'd be like, oh yeah, and I'm sure, that, oh yeah, of course you would say that because, I'm great. But now the place that I know that you're at, and I can say that from being at that place, is I shake my head in disbelief, and I'm like, it's unreal that somebody could value and benefit from my suffering. Do you ever, does that cross your mind where you just go, wow.
I think... I guess I feel fortunate. I don't know if I feel like I realized the power early on of embracing the trauma that I had been through. And I think once again, we talk about challenging the status quo. Yeah. I think we did that because the status quo is, don't talk about the bad things you've been through. And bigger than that, if you've been through bad things, and this is the pervading mindset right now in America, if you've been through bad things, you're a victim.
Yeah.
And I challenge that. I challenge, if you've been through bad things, congratulations.
Yeah. So your belief and your mindset around that is.
Yeah.
And, I read something that said recently that over 90% of us have had some type of trauma and drama in our life that we are either avoiding or trying to overcome. 90%, you guys. This is, and I'm not a fan of I love Brene Brown. She's in my book, and I love the power of vulnerability and authenticity. I don't need you coming in and vomiting all your shit all over the place and telling, that's the victim mindset. And I think some of us are confusing authenticity and vulnerability. People earn the right to hear your story is what she talks about. And so I think what you're alluding is, and what you're talking about is holding a belief that, yeah, we've got it. We've got to talk about it. We've got to pull the curtains back, and we got to let some light in. And like you said, with your friend's book with the dragon, and it's okay. You're going to be okay.
Yeah.
You're going to make it through this. You're going to survive. And if you do not survive, then there is a greater something else at play. And I hold that belief, and so do you. But there's this space of, but our stories have healing power.
Yes.
And your story is what you're out there telling people and waking people up to the potential. So why I'm saying all this is, and I want you guys to hear this too, your story has power.
Yes.
Who you are in hearing Jason's story or my story, anyone else's story, you have a story too, and it matters. I say this a lot, Jason, you matter simply because you exist. We don't raise our kids with that knowledge or belief.
No, not in this day and age. I mean, geez, we're raising victims.
Yeah.
And,
so we're moving.
Everyone has a story.
Yeah. And so my hope is the work that you're doing, the work that I'm doing, that a lot of us out there and thought leaders in this work are doing is we're raising and we're reconditioning, repatterning even adults to become victors. What would a world look like if we all had the tenacity that you just shared with your story? And I want you guys that are listening and watching thinking about that. You know, what would it look like if you woke up and you stuck with it one more minute, one more time? What would it look like if you didn't quit? You didn't give up on you. Because I'll tell you this, nobody would have bet on me when I was my lowest, and I had to learn how to bet on me. And so your work is helping people continually go back into what I call self-referral. I can do it. Pull it back up, try again.
Overcome.
Don't quit, overcome. So Jason, this is, I mean, we could go on forever, and you know, I love this stuff. I could talk about it. You've got some cool books. So tell us the name. I know I got one here because you signed this for me years ago when it first came out. This is the first one, right? The Trident?
That's right. So Trident went on to be a New York Times bestseller. It is the story and
of what happened and everything that you just talked about in great detail.
Yeah, leadership failure, redemption, injury, overcoming it, and it's a love story.
Oh man, you're just amazing. And sorry, ladies, he's married. And I know the long-haired admiral. She's amazing. So the second book, what's the second one?
Overcome is the how-to. So, and for years, a lot of people would read the Trident, and because it's a story, they would say, "How did you do this?" And that's how a lot of these. The Pentagon of Peak Performance, the Rule of 3 Ps, the rules of leadership all really got fleshed out in Overcome. So all those concepts are in there.
Yeah. And you know, so when you and I started working together on the Overcome Academy, and you were talking about curriculum, and I was sharing with you kind of, you know, what I do with clients, and we worked a little bit together on the Overcome Academy and kind of just framing out what you were going to build, you know, that's where a lot of our work was very similar. And I kind of spun off into the rebel tattooed biker, you know, I don't give a fuck clientele rebel world, and you spun off into your world. But we have a lot of similar foundations in our work because we've overcome. And so when you started to create the second book, Overcome, then I started kind of creating my book. And then now you're on to your third book, which is
Point Man Planner.
Yep. And then that one's just been released. You were just talking about that. So where do people go to get your stuff? Because I want you guys to know, I always believe in holding everything with an open palm, which means I can give and receive. This guy's got tremendous amounts of wisdom, and you can add all of what you're learning and then go into Jason's work. So how do people find you, and where do they go? What's the deal? How do you tell people?
JasonRedmond.com.
Okay.
So if you go on there, all my socials are down on the bottom, so you can follow me there. I put out nothing but positive content about overcoming adversity and leadership. And from there, it'll take you to getoffx.com if you're interested in coaching and our online courses. And we're continuing to build that out.
I love that. I love that. And you know, as we are getting ready to wrap up, I'm thinking about this with what you said, and I want to read this to you. Jason hasn't actually read the book. He doesn't need to read my book. He is
but
the book.
I would love to. I mean, I just got here.
You're getting a copy. Yeah. You're getting a copy. Don't worry. And I've got my story in there too, in waves. But you know, and I have a lot of worksheets and stuff like that. But in the very end of my book, and I'm kind of flipping to this because you know we're all speaking, I think, very similar language. But something that is in here, and I want to read this because this was kind of in relationship to what you were just talking about with the light. And so this is what I say, very last paragraph of my book. And it says, with healing, there comes a magic, a dignity, and a divinity that cannot be translated into words. It's just an experience. You have to stay the course, know that the healing is happening, but it has its own time and formula. And that's what I call mindfulness, the shutting up and sitting down and trusting the healing process to become whatever it's meant to be. It's doing the work, but trusting the process to do its work at the same time. Those moments when it's hard, when you feel alone, when you want to give up, when you wish you had a different family or a different life, I've been through them all. But you just stay the course. You just keep moving deeper and deeper in. And what you'll find is the deeper you go, it doesn't get darker. It gets you closer to the light.
Love it.
And so I don't own that wisdom because we're all receiving that wisdom and putting it out there in our work all over the world. And I love your light. I love your radiance. And even just, again, I love how God works. I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, like, who's the one to go to the mountaintop on this at the end of the show? It's not me, you guys. And this man is amazing. And I am honored and blessed by your story, by your presence, by your light.
Thank you.
And really, I can't say enough about who you are as a human being and how you have inspired me in my career. I haven't sat for 7 hours yet and autographed books like you, and maybe one day I will. But to be in your presence is an honor. It's a gift. And I'm wondering, before we go, what final words of wisdom would you offer to our listeners, to our viewers? They're listening to the podcast, they're taking the online course. All of us that are in this industry, we teach the same way. So we have similar ways that we work with clients. But I would love for the audience that's listening here, what words of wisdom would you leave with our listeners and our viewers?
I mean, the power resides in you. That's the thing. I meet a lot of people that I speak at events and they'll say, well, of course you can do that. You're a Navy SEAL. And once again, that is a little bit of a lie, and it's a little bit of an unrealistic expectation, because the things that I have learned and the things that I teach, they're not SEAL traits, they're human traits. Leadership is leadership regardless of what career path you walk in, because humans are the same. I've been all over the world, and humans, minus a little bit of cultural differences, we operate the same way. So an individual that leads someone in Iraq or China is no different from someone that leads someone here in America. And especially when it comes down to how we lead ourselves, our motivations may be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, it's about positivity. It's about building some structure and discipline. It's about believing in yourself and driving forward despite the self-doubts. It's building that overcome mindset, because it will get hard, guys. I'm telling you, man. If you are younger and you've never been through a life ambush, there's one coming. And if you are older and you've been through a couple, or maybe you're in one now, stay the course, man. You have it within you to do it. And if you're out of one, I got bad news, another one's coming. Yeah. But build a mindset. It's all within you. You have the power to do it. I'm
awesome.
living proof.
Yeah.
And it's never too late. It is never too late. I meet so many people who convince themselves it's too late for me. I often meet people who are older, like 60 and above, who say, oh, I'll get this book for my grandson because it's too late for me. And I'm like, that's not true. That is not true.
Yeah.
Did you know, I read this the other day, that Chick-fil-A, not Chick-fil-A, Kentucky Fried Chicken, Colonel Sanders created Kentucky Fried Chicken when he was like 64 or 65 years old, became a multimillionaire.
Yeah.
So you cannot tell me that
Yeah.
that it's too late.
I agree with you. And those are some powerful words. And, even though we're wrapping up all the episodes, and this is like, I don't know if we're like episode 50 now, closing up the book, I'm telling you what's cool. You're coming back. Jason's coming back. We've got a lot more series, a lot more shut up and sit. I want to do shut up and sit in relationships, Jason. I want to do shut up and sit at work, shut up and sit at home. I mean, if people could just shut up and sit and go within and look at this mindset and this, I've been talking about this inner MBA, mindful mastery of behavior and aspiration. If we could learn that as a tool, we put all this money into all this other education, and we lack the skills and capacities to master our own mind. So I've got some cool stuff. Jason's coming back. He's got cool stuff he's going to keep working on, and there's going to be lots more episodes, lots more workshops, courses, and
we'll have to come back for book number 4, because if you're talking about relationships, Long-Haired Admiral and I are writing a relationship.
Shut up.
Yeah. Because it's become such a big question. Everybody gets to know her, and we've been together 22 years, and we've been through some major life ambushes. We have great kids, successful, well-rounded, balanced kids, and people are like, how'd you do it?
Yeah. Come on back, because we're going to talk. Right. We'll have her with us. I'll let her sit in the middle.
You'll love her so much more than me.
She's amazing. And there's just so much, and I would love to keep talking. And thank you for bringing us to the mountaintop. You are an absolute shining star example of somebody who has found silence and all the life-changing magic that comes with it when they go within and they master their own mind. I couldn't think of anybody that I'm more honored and in more awe and respect of to bring in to take all of our listeners and viewers and students and clients to the mountaintop. So from the mountaintop, we are not going to stay here. We're going to come back down, and what I say is you don't go to the mountaintop and stay there. You get your shit together, and then you come back down and you sit your ass in the middle of all the craziness in the world, and your healing impacts the healing of the others and of the world. And you're a shining example of that. So thank you all so much for hanging with Jason and I. It's been an absolute honor. We will see you on what's coming up next. So stay tuned. We've got a whole nother series after our core Shut Up and Sit, but that finishes almost 50 episodes and content. So, hey, wherever you are, thanks for hanging out with us, for shutting up, for sitting. Jason, as always, awesome. And I will see you all on the next one. Take care.
May you know goodness. May you know peace. May you know contentment. May you be